listeners to this free independent music station. All you listeners are now in the mix.
Warning. Unlicensed radio operations can result in stiff penalties. Hobby Broadcasting Radio does not encourage any radio operations that run contrary to the regulations in the region where you live. Always consult with the appropriate authorities regarding what is permissible in your locale. Tonight's episode of Hobby Broadcasting Radio features an interview with Chris Smolinski, creator of HF Underground and software developer at Black Cat Systems.
For tonight's show, our special guest is Chris Smolinski. It's great to have you on, and could you please tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into the hobby?
Well, let's see. I got started, I guess, back in the late 70s. I remember I was a kid at the time, I don't know, 12, 13, something like that, and we were in a drugstore, and I was looking at the magazines, and there was an electronics magazine, elementary electronics, I think, and it had an article, and I was going through it, and it had some articles on listening to shortwave radio, and I remember my dad had a portable radio, a little one with a whip antenna that tuned in shortwave. I don't think I had ever used it before much, so I decided to get the magazine and try out the radio and see what I could hear, and I guess really just got hooked on it.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I know that there are a few people who got into it from elementary electronics, so that's pretty cool that you did.
Yeah, I guess it was them and Popular for Electronics were the two at the time.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, they were bi-monthly, I think, but I seem to remember they did a lot more shortwave articles. They seem to be at least in my opinion, the better of the, do for that. So I had a fun time playing around with the radio, and, unlike today with all the electronics and computers and stuff we have in the house with the, that makes all sorts of RFI, I remember with just the whip antenna, I used to be able to hear, Latin American stations down on 60 and 90 meters even. And, just amazing stuff that nowadays, of course, now they're all gone anyway, but, you could never possibly use one in the house and hear things so easily.
Yeah, and, well, it's kind of a shame all around. There's some positives to all the RFI producing devices, but some negatives too.
It definitely does make listening harder. Although I would have certainly loved back then to have had an SDR. So.
When did you get interested in pirates?
I was trying to think. I think I got my first pirate QSL. I want to say like maybe 1980 or something like that. I think what it was is after I got into shortwave, I remember I would listen to. You remember Glenn Hauser used to do like every week on Radio Canada International. International on their DX program with, what was it, Ian McFarland?
Yeah.
I think?
Yeah.
He would do like a little DX news summary, I think. And I think he often talked about the pirates that were being heard. So I said, oh, that sounds kind of fun. So I tried to tune around, and, it was a lot harder to hear them back then, I think, than it is now. They hadn't really settled on just one frequency, and they hopped around a lot. Just the teeth of the FCC back in the 70s was certainly, a lot sharper.
Absolutely. Yeah, up through about 20 years ago.
I think so, right? Yeah. I mean, so they really were. There was a lot of concern in the FCC with shortwave pirates. Was very active. But I think, I would listen to his DX news reports. I probably started to subscribe to the Review of International Broadcasting about the same time, and then tuned around. I want to say, I'm trying to think. My first pirate QSL, it might have been like, the name just escaped me. I can visualize the QSL. It was like a picture of a trash dump or something, and the name just popped out of my head. I can't.
Was that Radio Confusion?
Right, that's it. Yeah. Okay, you probably have the same one. I wanted to say Radio Clandestine, but no, yes. That was it. Radio Confusion. I think that was probably the first one.
Yeah, I didn't hear it. It was just a little bit before my time, but
okay.
I love the QSL of Scenic Lake Confusion.
That's it. Yes, that's it. That was probably one of the first ones that I got, and then some of the others after that, and then I think shortly after I discovered that there were the pirates operating above the medium wave band, which of course back then ended at 1600 kilohertz.
Cool.
And so, they'd be on, 1610, 1615, 1620 maybe?
Yeah, all the way up to, 1632 for WART, I think.
Right. They tended to stay as close as they could to, the band, just a little bit above. And I really loved hearing those. I guess most were out of, New York City or New England maybe.
Yeah.
Which they usually came in pretty well here. And I still have, I think, a soft spot for them. I have to say they're still one of my favorite things to hear. Definitely the medium wave band's nowhere as near as active with the high power ones as it was back in the 80s. I still try to, at least in the wintertime, run an SDR recording above the band, which now is above 1700 kilohertz. And actually, Good Times Radio was on 1720, I think, the other day.
I saw your log of that.
Yeah, and on 1720, and then there was an NID on, I guess, 1730 and 40 back on Christmas Eve, and I think that was probably throwback 90s, which has also been active off and on recently. They play a lot of electronic dance music, which makes it easy to ID them even when they don't ID. So yeah, there's still activity above the band. 1710 is really tough because of the Hudson County TIS. As I like to call it, I give it the unofficial name, the Hudson County TIS of Doom.
Right now it's almost like a jammer because it's just playing that loop over and over again.
It's the We're Broken loop, and they've been running it for weeks now, and honestly, if there's anyone at the FCC listening, would you like to pull their license? Because it just serves no purpose at all.
No, other than to block the frequency.
Yeah, other than to which is maybe why they got I think they got a special license for 100 watts.
Yeah, and there's absolutely no reason for it. They're strong here. They're good on the car radio.
They're good on the car radio. They fade out here around local noon, I guess, when the delayer's strongest, but they come right back in again. Even when they're not broken, they're playing COVID messages from April of 2020. It's definitely wins the award for the most useless TIS station, which I agree there's a lot of contenders, but they're, yeah.
But at least those are running, like 5 watts into a guardrail.
Exactly. I think it's like 5 or 10 watts or so. But there's occasionally their transmitter will go completely off the air, and it's great because I've got a little window here, and they did that once, and I was able to actually get the TIS up at Springfield, Massachusetts.
Oh wow!
There's
nice.
one run at the Armory, I guess, where they built weapons for the Army back in the 1800s, and that's like one of my favorite QSLs ever, I think.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so I mean, if there's any pirates listening, avoid 1710 at least here on the East Coast because you're not going to get through.
I guess over I don't know exactly how far they get out with a good signal, but they definitely wipe out the Northeast.
They really do, and I guess they just applied for the extra license, and someone at the FCC said, sure, why not? And there's only a few stations on 1710. There's, them, Springfield, and there's a few others. I remember, there was the official list of all the TIS stations from the FCC, and I was like, well, why aren't a few other ones on there that I know should be, like, Springfield Armory? And I poked around, and I found, this was a few years ago, I found that all the federally run TIS stations, like at the national parks or whatever, are not licensed by the FCC. They're licensed by, what is it, the NTIA, something like that?
Oh, okay.
Federal agency.
Okay.
So I was like, I'd like to get the list. So I actually filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the federal government, and they sent me a CD-ROM with like 200 with database of 250 or so TIS stations licensed by the Fed. But what's nice about that is, of course, they're not on the FCC list. So it's the only way to really find out.
That's really strange.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
I really didn't either. It was more of I was looking for like, nearby both of us, there's the Flight 93 station.
Yeah.
Right, and that wasn't showing up either. And I was like, well, this is weird because they're on the air, I don't think they're any kind of a pirate or anything. And then I dug around and I guess somehow figured out that, any of the radio stuff run on the federal land, the parks, isn't licensed by the FCC. You have to go to a different agency. So anyway, that was kind of neat to actually get the list of all the other ones.
Oh yeah, definitely. I have a soft spot also for TISs. So they're just kind of weird little stations. So.
They are, and I actually find daytimes are often a great time to DX them, because especially in the wintertime, because you don't tend to get the high power station like on 1630, 1640.
Yeah.
And you have a better chance. I know Pennsylvania runs a lot of them on the highways. I can actually pick up some of them here, or just before the gray line starts to kick in, you can get some interesting DX.
Yeah.
Just like you, they're kind of fun. They're not the same thing as the higher power broadcast stations, and you never quite, I'll sometimes sit like on 1640 or something like that, and if you listen, you'll hear a station, and then for a few minutes it'll fade out, and somebody else will fade in, and somebody else, then someone else will fade in.
Yeah, I've heard some of the Maryland highway ones on, I guess 1630 and 1640. And I have written to a couple of them for QSLs. The one was really cool. They sent me some photographs too.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, it was, I think that was for the Philadelphia airport.
Okay, yes, interesting. I think I have like one other QSL, probably for one of the Maryland ones, which really wasn't DX, but I guess at the time it sounded fun. I'll probably have to see if I can write some, more of them. But the whole, even with the broadcast stations now on the X band, above 1600, there's still a lot of interesting holes where you can sometimes hear things. It's still kind of a fun. It's really my favorite part of the medium wave band.
We'll be back in a few minutes with more of our interview with Chris Smolinski. If you would like a QSL card from this program of Hobby Broadcasting Radio, please send your reception report to Hobby Broadcasting Radio, Post Office Box 109, Blue Ridge Summit, Pennsylvania 17214. That's Hobby Broadcasting Radio, P.O. Box 109, Blue Ridge Summit, Pennsylvania 17214. Return postage is not necessary, but we do appreciate it to offset our costs. Or if you would like an EQSL or would like to write to say hi or contribute something, our email address is info@hobbybroadcasting.com. For part two of our interview with Chris Smolinski of HF Underground and Black Cat Systems.
Europirates were then something I got into, I guess, back in the early 80s maybe, as somewhat of a more interesting DX target than just the local US ones. And those have been fun also.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I got into them later because they weren't, between not having the equipment and early 80s, they seemed to have the right sunspot cycle for them and everything. You know, I didn't really start hitting that up until like Weekend Music Radio started having their tests on 19 meters and things like that.
Yeah, they were, I guess over the summer or fall, there were a few Mike Radio and a few others were on 15070, the old frequencies that were used back then also.
Yeah.
Those, with the increased solar activity we've had, you know, the below the 19-meter band's really a good place to go across the pond. I was kind of surprised that more stations weren't taking advantage advantage of it. But I guess with pirate radio, there's a lot of stations operate where the listeners are, and listeners listen where the pirates are. So it's kind of difficult to move.
Although the 4 megahertz range has really taken off.
It has. I guess during the solar minimum, that became the place where you really had to go if you wanted to be heard at night. And there's still, like you said, there's still a lot of activity down there.
Yeah, especially for wintertime.
Some of them, I think, get a little too close to the Mars operators, maybe.
Yeah. I don't think 4030 is a place where you should go.
Every time I see someone's on 4030, I'm thinking you are spinning the chamber. In the roulette pistol, the Russian roulette pistol. That's a very dangerous place to operate.
Yeah, I agree. Just about a week or so ago, I heard Mars on 4027.
And we were just, talking about how when it comes to shortwave pirates, the FCC's not been terribly active for a number of years. The recent busts have been because someone's been on the wrong frequency. And I have to say, some of those MarsNet operators essentially have the FCC on their speed dial. If they make a complaint, I think the FCC would take it very seriously.
Yeah, and I don't know if they can get military involved with anything like that or not.
Right.
But
they would. I assume the military for HF should have direction finding capabilities on par with the FCC, or perhaps even superior.
Yeah, and boy, that's not anything you really want to mess with.
No, getting the FCC upset with you is one thing, but getting the military upset with you, that could be far more serious. Of course, the whole direction finding brings up the QESDRs, which I know you wanted to talk about also.
I think the TDOA stuff is pretty interesting, and you've had a lot more experience with that than most people, certainly than me. I didn't really mess with any of that at all.
I know when that first came out, there was a lot of concern in the pirate world about TDOA, that essentially would let people both figure out where the operators were located, and I guess the concerns of enforcement risks from the FCC. And I know, I'm not going to name any names, I know a few operators who haven't been on the air much or at all the past few years, and the reason they gave was because of the TDOA.
Me too.
My take on it's a little different from that. One, the FCC has obviously had DF capabilities for a very long time. Two, far superior to what hobbyist QESDRs can do. And three, if they're interested in busting a pirate, they're not going to go to a QESDR. They're going to use what they have. And as far as the capabilities of it, I ran when it first came out and ran a bunch of tests with it on known stations in and around the pirate band, like CFRX in Toronto on 6070, or CHU on 7850, and a few other military stations in and around the 43 meter band, and shortwave broadcast stuff also here in the U.S. I kind of wanted to get a feel for how good is TDOA. Is this something to really be concerned about? And my general opinion is not really. It's not always super precise. There's precision and there's accuracy, which are not exactly the same thing. And sometimes the TDOA can give you a very precise hit that's surprisingly close, like I would sometimes be able to get CFRX, to within maybe 10 or 15 miles of where the transmitter's located near Toronto. But other times it would be like 100 miles off. And a lot of the capability of TDOA getting good results means you have to pick good QESDRs to use. You have to pick ones that have a relatively good setup, that have good GPS signals, and that are correctly located around the station. You kind of want to encircle the station with at least 3. You need at least 3, but 4 and 5 can be good Kiwi SDRs. Well, that means in order to do that, you have to know where the station is. Right, So to really do Kiwi SDR TDOA well, it kind of requires either first knowing where the station is, which takes some of the fun out of it, or it's an iterative process. You start with a bunch of Kiwi SDRs, and you see where it says the station is, and then based on that, you remove some and you add some others, and you go back and forth. And if you do that a bunch of times, and the ionosphere is behaving, and the Kiwi SDRs are good and all of that, you can sometimes get really good fixes. And by really good, I don't mean you're going to get, what side of the road someone's house is on, or someone's zip code even, but you're going to get, for a small state here on the East Coast, which state they're in, kind of a thing.
Yeah, yeah, and that would be the thing. If you're doing it for any length of time and trying to spot, you're going to end up with some going, as time progresses, you're going to wind up with some going into skip zones. Yes. You're going to have others that are fading out.
Yes, I mean, the whole way it works is based on the name. It's timing how long the radio signal takes to get from the transmitter to several receivers, and since you know where those receivers are and you know how fast the speed of light is, you can figure out how far from each transmitter the station is, and you draw a bunch of circles. Of course, this is all being done in software, and where they intersect is where the transmitter is. But of course, one of the inherent problems you've got there is it's the distance the radio signal travels. Well, for shortwave signals, that's not a straight line on the surface of the Earth. The ionosphere is involved. So the signal has to go up and bounce down again. And of course, the height of the ionosphere varies.
Yeah, and as anybody who's experienced echo effect.
Oh, absolutely. And you have some interesting propagation modes, which would be a whole discussion by itself. I've kind of over the months or year or two after reading some science papers, really become an advocate that multi-hop across the ionosphere isn't really how a lot of the interesting DX happens. I tend to think that there's some ducting mechanisms in
that's cool.
Much like on VHF. And this can be the case also for short-distance DX, because you sometimes hear stations that, based on propagation models, you shouldn't be able to hear. The classic example I remember from a few years ago, I was tuning around in July, around like 2 in the afternoon local time, the 49-meter band, and I heard something, and I'm like, well, wait, I'm only supposed to be able to hear CFRX right now. What is this? And it was on a weird frequency offset, and I tuned it in, and I'm looking up to see who could be on the air right now. And the only possible station is one down in Bolivia. I'm like, well, no, it can't be that. There's absolutely no way. And I remember making a recording of what I was hearing, and then somebody checked the remote SDR down in South America, and sure enough, that's what it was.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I'm like, okay, based upon the traditional multi-hop ionosphere models and all of that, because of attenuation by the D layer, not possible. Absolutely impossible, cannot happen. And then I started to look at papers, and there's actually science papers in the journals going back to the 50s. The military was investigating this. And there really seems to be ducting mechanisms that are also possible on HF. I mean, the normal bouncing off the ionosphere works most of the time, but it's like it's not the only way.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then, back to TDOA, as you said, because you've got echoes and all these other propagation modes that can happen. If you get path lengths that are longer or shorter than expected, that's going to screw up the timing, and that's going to move where the radio station is, or where the software thinks it is. And light moves very fast, so errors of microseconds translate into miles, and so it's very possible for you to get gross errors. And I could find cases where I would DF a shortwave broadcast station or a utility station, and I knew exactly where it was, and I'm getting errors of like 150 miles.
And that's pretty significant if somebody's trying to DF something.
Exactly. And, you know, of course, it also goes back to if the FCC wants to fine you, they're going to use their equipment, which I presume is significantly more advanced. I mean, don't get me wrong, the TDOA capabilities built into the Kiwis are amazing and absolutely fabulous. And when you're trying to figure out what broadcast station you're listening to or utility or something like that, it's fabulous. It's a really great thing someone came up with. But I don't know that it really is the danger to shortwave pirates that a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but some people think it is, versus, you know, you can scroll through the pirate loggings on the HFU when someone's on the air, look at the dozen or 2 dozen sometimes loggings and look at where the listeners are. That alone is going to pretty much tell you where a station's probably located. At least with,
in general.
You know, you're going to get a general feel. I mean, whether are they in Montana or are they in Florida kind of a thing, certainly.
Yeah, and especially if
probably are they in Florida or are they in North Carolina?
Yeah, and especially if they're running daytime.
Absolutely. I mean, if they're running daytime, especially in the summer, where you've got a strong D layer, there's a fairly small radius that a station's going to get out. And of course, the thing that that many people maybe don't think about also, it's not just who's hearing a station, but it's who's not hearing one, especially at night when the band starts to go long.
Yeah.
And if you've been a DXer for a number of years, and you can kind of get a feel for how propagation works, and it's going to clue you in really quickly to about where a station is. And you mentioned earlier there's lots of locations where there's not a lot of pirate operators, and the general rule of thumb is that pirates are run by people who also listen to pirates.
Yeah, and
so you can put two and two together. And so the general policy, which we enforce on the HFU, is that you don't publicly speculate on where someone is. It's just, you know, not good form.
No, and fortunately, well, and I think that, okay, the one person that I talked to who said, I'm not doing any more of this stuff with TDOA around.
Right.
I'm not sure if it was so much because of potential FCC interference or if it was more the potential for doxing.
That's a good point. You bring up an excellent point. So you're saying that people within the hobby,
well, or on the fringes, either way. And that can be, you know, if you get some people out there that whether they're hams with a vengeance against pirates or, you know, and not to say anything bad about hams on here, because there are a lot of hams who listen to pirates. And
who possibly pirates themselves.
Yeah. Exactly. But there's a certain element that really does not like them.
Yes, there still is. It's not maybe quite as strong as it was, but yes, it is still there.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot weaker than it had been because, you know, back about 30, 35 years ago, there were a lot of hams that would turn red in the face when they saw or heard anything about pirate radio.
I seem to remember one of the DX clubs I belonged to. I want to say BDX, the QSL column. At one point, the guy who the editor of it said no more pirates. He didn't like pirates.
Yeah, and there were arguments about that in Friendex back about 45 years ago. Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, it's kind of hard to explain to people now because so many people in the hobby are like, you know, what?
Exactly. I wonder how much of that attitude is what led to the formation originally of the ACE.
Yeah, I think it really did. Because
to kind of give pirates and listeners a safe place, to use modern terms, where you didn't have to worry that some extra-class ham was going to fink on everyone to the FCC. Not to make fun of all extra-class hams. Many of them, I think, listen to pirates. But, back then, as you said, it was very different.
Yeah, and I think between a combination of attitudes changing and also, really, how many hams have been affected? For the pirates that are on the air on shortwave right now, how much are they really harming anything? And once you experience some of what it is that's going on, it's the pirates definitely aren't harmful.
No, exactly. It's and which I think is what drives the FCC's enforcement priorities on FM. The priority is coming from the licensed stations that don't want to lose listeners. They give the official reasons of interfering with aircraft, all the,
and emergency services, and
But it's mostly, I think, that the licensed stations don't want to lose the, listeners, and which should be telling you if some guy running a pirate station is actually taking that many of your listeners away, maybe you want to investigate a format change.
Yep.
But I think that's why on FM it's driven by that. On shortwave, you don't really have that. And AM, I think, has been forgotten about mostly.
Yeah, I think it's all about the real estate. FM real estate is valuable and it's finite, and shortwave is basically has no value right now, and it's essentially infinite.
It is. It's really different than when we got into the hobby back in the 80s when the bands would be full.
Yeah.
And AM stations are going dark now. It seems like every month you read about a few more that basically shut down and just turn in their license and sell the land and someone builds a shopping center.
Yeah, unfortunately, because I like listening to AM.
Oh yeah, like I said, it's in particular for me the X-Band. It's just a really fun one, and I'll sometimes tune around 5:30. I like to listen to. There's the Canadian station. There's one in Ontario, I think. The one that has a Indian format that the Bangalore Poacher used audio from.
Okay, yeah.
You probably know the one I'm talking about. Yes.
Yeah.
But yes, they play a very wide range of music and things, and it's just fun. It's just fun to listen to. And being on 5:30, there's like no one else on.
We'll be back in a few minutes with more of our interview with Chris Smolinski. Since 1991, Black Cat Systems has been producing a variety of software programs for the Macintosh platform, specializing in the audio, science, health, and amateur radio markets. Some of the programs include Atomic Mac, a comprehensive periodic table of the elements; Soundbites, the ultimate cart machine for the Macintosh that's used by several professional sports teams for stadium sound effects; Diet Sleuth, a nutritional logbook and calculator package; and Health Tracker, an easy way to track and graph your health measurements. You can download dozens of programs and apps for iPhones and Androids at the Black Cat Systems website at blackcatsystems.com. Black Cat Systems has also created electronics kits and components, including several impedance matching balance for a variety of antennas, for radio listening, and low power beacon kits. Whether you're looking for software to decode pirate SSTV images or a beacon kit made for your next fox hunt, check out blackcatsystems.com. blackcatsystems.com. operated a pirate radio station? Or do you have a high quality or studio recording of pirate stations? We'd like to hear from you. We're looking for recordings of stations that we might be able to use in future programs of hobby broadcasting radio. AM, FM, or shortwave, it doesn't matter. North America, Europe, or somewhere else, we're looking for it. Cassette, MP3 file, CD, 8-track, or open reel tape, we'd like to have it. Drop us a line at info@hobbybroadcasting.com. That's info@hobbybroadcasting.com. Here's part 3, the final segment of our interview with Chris Malinsky of HF Underground and Black Cat Systems.
Have you tracked, like, government users of HF Underground?
Not for a long time. I think when it first started, I would look at the weblogs to see if we were getting visits from the FCC, and yes, we were. You know, not a huge number. I'll tell you, I haven't looked now for years, because now that's going to be in the back of my mind, and I'm going to want to go look and see. But I think we were getting some. Now, whether it's because, I don't know that if it's for enforcement issues so much as I have to assume that FCC field agents are essentially RF engineers, right? I mean, you know, and to some extent, and therefore a significant percentage of them are probably into the radio hobby.
Yeah, I don't know. So
I would think. I mean, they may not want to tell their supervisors that they collect pirate QSLs, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of them do.
I don't know. The couple that I've talked to really didn't seem to have, as far as I could tell, much interest in radio, period.
Really interesting. It was just a 9 to 5.
Yeah, kind of like, bureaucrats who learned, something about radio. I guess probably went through training somewhere and really didn't have a lot of interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was the big deal, 20 years ago, whenever Riley Hollinsworth was going around to different ham shows and stuff to talk. And it was a big deal because here was an FCC guy who was actually a ham.
That's right.
And so I think that's more the exception than the rule, but I don't really know because, it's not like I know a lot of these guys or have even talked to a lot of these guys. I just have a couple of experiences, and I would think also that if they were really interested in radio, period, that they would be maybe not doing anything publicly with pirate radio, but at least shortwave listening.
Right. And I guess most of the FCC, again, other than the example you gave, most of the higher FCC officials, it's probably their position is more political than technical.
That's my guess. Again, I don't really know, but I haven't seen anything to indicate otherwise.
Right. Interesting.
I wonder if there are other government agencies, like intelligence agencies, that are checking out HF Underground. They gotta figure out if those Hawaiian number stations are, putting out code to Hawaiian terrorist groups or something.
Terrorist groups seeking independence from the U.S., the Hawaiian Liberation Front or whatever. I know when the Ukraine war started, I think there were some shutdowns of SDRs in Ukraine or Russia or parts of Europe. And I think, hasn't China limited access? Oh, well, speaking of that, though, in Kiwi SDRs, there was a problem. I even had it here with my Kiwi SDRs, and a lot of other owners were mentioning it too, with users with Chinese IP addresses sitting on the Kiwis for extended time periods, monitoring U.S. military HF frequencies.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And I know I was blocking IP addresses addresses left and right for a while. Initially, just because I was like, well, you guys are tying them up for, all day long. And I like to let other people listen in. I try to have them set up so there aren't time limits, And then even when you try to ban the IP addresses, it was like playing whack-a-mole. They would just go to some other proxy. So what's up with that? I'm not really sure.
I don't know, but that's really interesting.
Yes. You would think, you would, on the one hand, think the Chinese government would have its own network of things, obviously, but on the other, I guess they wouldn't be opposed to taking advantage of whatever resources they're able to.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's a lot easier. Although you would think that they would just set up a couple of their own, basically, Kiwi SDRs to monitor. But I guess it's a lot easier just to use other people's. But
exactly. You would think that they could, they could certainly set them up at their embassies and consulates and so on all around the world. I presumably have. Well, likewise, I would assume all the Western nations have done the same thing. It's kind of, the intelligence game is certainly one of those where everyone knows everyone's spying on everybody else, and radio is just another form of it.
Yep. So I guess whenever you were checking before, did you see that there were any foreign intelligence agencies who were monitoring HF Underground or just logging in?
I never really looked for that, I don't think. I don't know. I guess, wouldn't have known what IP or domain names to look for. I don't know what they would come back as. If they would come back as, I assume not KGB.ru or FSB.ru, I guess, nowadays, but I'm not sure. It's kind of a question a lot of us have had as far as to what extent is the radio hobby overall useful to intelligence agencies, not just the HFU, but for example, other groups like there's the UDXF utilities mailing list, the old WUN list, and other ones. Are intelligence agencies monitoring these lists to find out what's going on? I would think yes, they have their own resources. Obviously, they have their own listening sites. We have the NSA, and the UK has whatever they have, and so on. But on the other hand, it would make sense to look at what the hobbyists are doing, just because they might find something before you do.
Exactly. They might find something before, and they might be more accurate. They might have some interpretation of it if they are putting any interpretation out.
Sure. The more people you have looking at things, the more chance you have someone's going to, find something. So, so to answer your question, no, I really haven't looked, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're at least casually looking. If I was running an agency or involved in it, I would certainly try to use as many resources as I possibly could.
And and it could be for a bazillion different reasons that somebody would want to look at it. But I can think of just like the two-way communications, like the pescadors.
Right.
Somebody might want to be monitoring some of that stuff.
Sure.
Because of whether it's I don't know if any or how much of it could be smuggling or drug running or even illegal fishing.
Exactly. It's certainly possible that some of it is. Really, for maritime use, HF is still heavily used. It's kind of hard, I think, on a ship in 30-foot waves to aim that satellite dish. And we like to listen around and listen. And we find lots of users. There's on the HFU there's a group New England-based fishermen that a bunch of us like to listen to. We've nicknamed them the Angry Bastards because not just of all the swearing, which they certainly do, which they certainly do. But in general, complaining that they do also. Of course, fishing's a hard life, so I can understand that. And we hear them, and they'll talk about their catches and those kinds of things. Those who are involved in illicit activities are probably using HF also.
Yeah, one of the more interesting, like pescador cases that I heard, you've probably heard a lot more stuff like this with your, like recording whole swaths of the band. But I heard one that was, it was English speaking, and they were shrimp boat fishermen in, I think, Louisiana, and they were talking, and the one guy gave the other guy his phone number on the air. And I really wish that I would have written it down and then called him up and say, you realize this is getting out pretty far.
Yeah. There was, a number of years ago, there were some shrimpers from Florida who set up shop. They unfortunately picked 6925, and they would use that as their frequency. And in fact, it was often the guy like radioing back to his wife, I guess. And so they would have conversations and had no idea that they were being listened to, I think, until finally some pirate got on and basically razzed them over the air. Unfortunately, we didn't hear them anymore after that. I find it interesting how many, U.S. fishermen, for example, we hear that are clearly operating outside of the maritime bans.
Yeah, you would think that they would stick within.
Right. Well, I was thinking about that. I was talking to somebody, and he brought up the point that, a lot of times the fishermen don't want other fishermen to hear what they're catching and where.
Oh, okay.
They want to keep their good spot secret, and so maybe they figure an easier way to do that is to be someplace else.
Yeah, I guess that would be easier than speech encryption, but...
Right. And I think a lot of these guys, I think ICOM makes a bunch of maritime transceivers that I think you can open up, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them just have standard ham transceivers that they've, done the diode surgery on.
Yeah, and that doesn't take anything.
That doesn't take anything, and they've got a nice 100, 200 watt SSB rig, which is really all you need. And they simply use that, so they can use it within the bands, and they can use it outside the bands. I mean, none of these guys are ever giving call signs, right? I mean, even within the bands.
Yeah.
I don't even know how the maritime works if you have to, if you have to get licensed or have a call sign or how that. I've never heard one ever. Let's, put it that way. But they're often fun. So the ones that we listen to, they're out of New England. There's a group out of New York, Long Island. It sounds like also. We're speculating based on the accents. But they're often fun. They're often fun to listen to.
Now, what I wonder is how long it's going to take for some pirate to contact one of those guys so that they can put a transmitter on their ship and then do some broadcasting,
There you go. And then you could send them an MP3, or they probably got laptops on their ship by now anyway, a little thumb drive. Oh,
yep.
Here, air your show. We would actually have some offshore pirate radio again here in the U.S.
Yeah, and how easy would that be to track down or do something about? Probably not very.
Certainly.
So, they have a down day, maybe take, $5 or so here and there to air some programs.
I mean, that's something that could certainly be done even while they're out fishing. I suspect, I've occasionally caught that, what is that, the Tuna Wars? I don't know what it's called. You know the show I'm talking about with the fishermen?
Actually, I don't.
Channels. Probably giving it the wrong name now. But I remember watching one of the cable networks has it about the guys out fishing. It seems to be like there's a lot of downtime.
And it would be interesting if they would either start airing some programs or creating their own to do that while they're waiting.
Sure. They would certainly have. I would think with the conductive salt water ground plane helps them get out quite a bit because they often have really good signals.
Yeah, another thing that I thought would be interesting is if, especially with somebody like that, just toss out a buoy with maybe solar panels on the top and a long whip antenna. What would happen as it traveled through the currents?
The world. Yes. There are the fishnet beacons that people do listen to, although they just transmit Morse IDs. Although what you're saying reminds me of the pirate beacons in the southwest U.S. that run down around 4 megahertz. You've heard of those?
Yep.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I guess, a maritime version of that, basically.
Yeah, or kind of a maritime version of old-time radio unidentified.
Radio, yes. Yeah, I don't know how many, what size solar panel you would need to get enough power, although you could probably have a battery and just do intermittent transmissions or something.
Yeah. If there was a timer on it, it only did like maybe 2 15-minute chunks a day or something.
Exactly, or it could like sense the battery, and as long as the battery's good, once the battery gets low, turn off or something. Yeah, I used to like to DX those Southwest beacons, but with the solar cycle changes, the reception has not been very good recently, and that's kind of always been a West Coast pirate radio phenomena. Because they have nice sunny days, I mean, well, you're not far from me, and I'm looking out the window right now, and solar panels would not do very well right now.
Only if you had a larger footprint for them.
Yes, you would. I think if you wanted to run, old-time radio here right now off of solar power, you need a panel the entire size of my roof. It's pretty. I think that's why those kinds of beacons have never caught on here on the East Coast. We just don't have the right, weather for it.
And that's all the time we have for tonight's show. I thank Chris Malinsky for taking the time to do this interview and to provide some great insights about HF Underground, Kiwi SDRs, TDOA, and shortwave listening in general. I'd never talked to Chris before, and it was fascinating. The only problem was that we talked for 3.5 hours, and it wasn't easy to choose which chunks would be best to edit down into the show. It would have been nice to have 2 hours or so to fill for this episode because a lot of good stuff just didn't make it on tonight. And one final point, there are a lot of knowledgeable and fascinating people in the pirate radio hobby. It's a privilege to be able to sit down with these people and bring some of their stories and insights to you. Thank you for spending part of your evening with us.
Thank you for listening to Hobby Broadcasting Radio. We hope that you enjoyed tonight's episode. If you would like to write to Hobby Broadcasting Radio, whether to comment on our programs or for QSL, our email address is info@hobbybroadcasting.com. info@hobbybroadcasting.com. Or Hobby Broadcasting Radio, P.O. Box 109, Blue Ridge Summit, Pennsylvania 17214. That's Hobby Broadcasting Radio, P.O. Box 109, Blue Ridge Summit, Pennsylvania 17214. We're on the Radio Angela transmitter of WBCQ on 5130 kilohertz every third Thursday. So pull out your calendar. Our next broadcast is on February 16th at 11 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. Central, which is UTC February 17 at 0400. We hope you'll join us then. has been a production of Hobby Broadcasting Radio.
In real life, it means nothing. If you don't know what you got. In real life, this is Mix Radio International. In real life, in real life. See, you haven't changed. It's good to see you anyway. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You never know on which day you will hear Mix Radio International. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Station with the best music. Best music. Mix Radio International. Slamming classics. This is Mix Radio International. Mix Radio International. Mix Radio International. Broadcasting from somewhere in the North Americas, this is independent free music radio on Shortwave. You're on the right frequency.
This is Mix Radio International.
It just rocks. Rocks.
The home of real music.
Mix Radio International. You're listening to a free, independent music radio station on Shortwave. This is MRI, Mix Radio International. The sound of free, independent music radio on Shortwave. This is Mix Radio International, the best music experience. You're listening to MRI, Mix Radio International.